Blessed are you, O God of our fathers. Praised be your name forever and ever. You made Adam, and you gave him his wife Eve to be his help and support. And from these two the human race descended. You said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. Let us make him a partner like himself." Now, Lord, you know that I take this wife of mine not because of lust, but for a noble purpose. Call down your mercy on me and on her, and allow us to live together to a happy old age.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Voris.
And I'm Simon Rafe. Welcome to Moral Compass.
Moral Compass, a simple observation of history, leads to the conclusion that marriage is a central, foundational feature of human society. You know, from generation to generation to generation, the love that brings together a man and a woman and motivates them to establish a partnership of life has been a source of joy, hope, and stability in a tough world, as well as, despite hopes to the contrary, a source of anguish, resentment, and heartbreak.
Now, such love has inspired poetry, prose, music, and theatre. It's the foundation of the family which shapes day-to-day life and forms, nurtures, and teaches the succeeding generations. It has been a privileged source from which unfolds much of the drama of life. In our role as husbands, or wives, daughters, or sons, each of us experiences the effects of this love, or lack thereof, of its health or its sickness, in profound ways that touch at the core of who we really are. Love, marriage, and family intertwined into complex symphonies. These make up a large part of the very stuff of life.
It's in the light of these truths we must consider the question of contraception. Over a period of only about 50 years, which you could almost say was overnight compared to the entire history of Christian civilization, contraception has entered into the complex symphonies of our love relationships, into our marriages and families, and has nearly become, like love, marriage, and family, a part of the stuff of life itself.
But is the addition of this particular stuff wholesome? Does it introduce harmony or discord into the symphony? One thing should be certain to everyone. Given the immense significance of love, marriage, the family, the introduction of contraception to the mix, well, that shouldn't be taken lightly. If these three things affect us so profoundly, then we should not be surprised to find that the use of contraception has had some kind of ripple effect on relationships and society. The Catholic Church, almost alone in the world, condemns contraception in its teachings as intrinsically evil. In this regard, the Church represents, like her Lord, a sign of contradiction. What has become normal, the Church teaches, is immoral. Well, who's right here then? The Catholic Church or the popular view? Well, let's pause for a moment and, once again, reason together.
In the first decades of the 20th century, contraception was generally considered to be immoral. Christians, Jews, and other religious and non-religious people saw it as shameful and unnatural. Accepted instead, if necessary, were methods that involved abstinence during periods of fertility. But as the new century progressed, a movement in favor of contraception was gaining steam, led most prominently by a woman named Margaret Sanger, who would become a founder of Planned Parenthood. What were the reasons given in favor of this profound change in behavior regarding one of the most central matters of human life? Well, much of the movement pushing these reasons were driven by people who, secretly or not, wished to transform the moral landscape, dethroning morality.
The Christian communities resisted the mounting pressure until 1930, when, at its Lambeth Conference, the leadership of the Anglican Church reversed its previous resistance and began to approve the use of contraception for married couples in extreme circumstances.
The birth control and the population growth movements made predictions and arguments that had, and for many still have, a degree of plausibility to them. Combined with the convenience of using contraceptives, which removes the need for self-discipline and sexual abstinence, these arguments can seem extremely compelling.
In response, Pope Pius XI released Casti Conubii, affirming that the primary natural end of the conjugal act is the begetting of children. He said, any use whatsoever of matrimony exercised in such a way that the act is deliberately frustrated in its natural power to generate life is an offence against the law of God and of nature. And that, quote, no reason, however grave, may be put forward by which anything that is intrinsically against nature may become conformable to nature and morally good. By 1950, the birth control movement had basically won over public opinion. In the following years, increasing pressure was placed upon the Catholic Church. By that time, the last major Christian denomination still condemning the practice, and the newly released contraceptive pill fueled the sexual revolution of the 1960s.
In his encyclical, his letter called Casti Conubii, emphasized that contraception goes contrary to the primary natural purpose of the sexual act. And of course, it should be obvious to anyone that producing the next generation is if not the primary reason that the sexual act exists.
It was in the midst of these turbulent times that, after considering the case of those who argued that the Church's traditional teaching was something that could be reformed, Pope Paul VI reaffirmed the age-old teaching in the landmark encyclical Humanae Vitae.
But not everyone could see that this fact should result in a moral condemnation of contraception. What's the deeper meaning behind the idea that contraception is an unnatural frustration of the sexual act? Well, in Humanae Vitae, and it's another encyclical, this one by Pope Paul VI in 1968, the matter gets clarified more.
See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that their angels in heaven always look upon the face of my heavenly Father.
This is Pope Paul VI's definition of contraception. Any action which either before or at the moment of or after sexual intercourse is specifically intended to prevent procreation, whether as an end or as a means. The key, first and foremost, is that an act of contraception is against procreation. As the word itself reveals, it is a contraception act, an act that is against the beginning of a new human life. It is an act against life in its very origins, and in the very place that it naturally finds its origins, sexual intercourse.
By contra-life act, a person acts directly against a great good, which he should value and reverence immensely. By using that condom or taking that pill, they intend to impede the coming to be of human life, acting as if it were bad instead of good. They turn their will, intentionally directing it against a great, beautiful, and necessary good.
So one might say then that contraception is an assault on new life in its very home, in the place where it lives, so to speak. Likewise, contraception violates the integrity of the marital act, for that act is the place that is meant to be safe and hospitable for life.
Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me.
Pope John Paul II especially has helped the Church become aware of another aspect of the evil of contraception. When a couple freely intends to exclude the possibility of new life from an act of sexual intercourse, they thereby falsify the natural language communicated by that act. They falsify the language of love. Now, what does he mean by the language of love? For anyone who has been in love, it's not very difficult to understand. Lovers are utterly fascinated with one another. They feel swept up by currents of feeling. They want to be together all the time. They want their love to never end. They embrace one another. They feel propelled towards a union that is total. Virtue requires them to avoid going too far and certainly not to go all the way until the right time. But when that time comes and they go all the way, they give themselves to one another in an act that you might say speaks of the total union that they've desired all along.
In attacking new life, the sexual act is no longer the safe and hospitable place it's meant to be. In losing its life-giving meaning, it also loses some of its love-giving meaning. So on the one hand, as an act expressing total self-giving, the marital act is the fitting vessel by which men and women carry life into the future. Love is the soil from which life lives and thrives.
Contraception contradicts this language of total self-giving. Love propels to union, but at the critical moment, when it's time to go all the way, contraception holds back. It says, I want to give myself to you totally, but first, let me put a barrier up. It says, I want to give myself to you completely, but not my fertility. In the words of John Paul II, when couples have resource to contraception, they degrade human sexuality and with it themselves and their married partner by altering its value of total self-giving. Thus, the innate language that expresses the total, reciprocal self-giving of husband and wife is overlaid through contraception by an objectively contradictory language, namely, that of not giving oneself totally to the other. This leads to a falsification of the inner truth of conjugal love, which is called to give itself in personal totality.
As the means by which new human life is transmitted, the sexual act gives the couple a reference point beyond themselves, preventing their love from becoming focused inward, but instead turning it outward to be shared not only with any children they might conceive, but with the larger society, which needs new generations to carry on. In the sexual act, life and love go hand in hand.
In addition to all of this, contraception violates the great value of pregnancy and fertility as healthy bodily conditions. As with intentional mutilation or excessive drinking, health is treated as if it were bad. We know that pregnancy is a normal, healthy bodily condition for women, and fertility is for both women and men. But we should only take pills, use medical apparatuses, and get surgeries because we are sick, not because we are healthy. Are there any other healthy bodily conditions besides fertility and pregnancy that we consider of so little importance that we think we can choose willy-nilly to treat them as if they were diseases?
Contraception, according to this analysis, is out of touch with the deep rhythms of human nature. To turn oneself against life is to introduce a subtle corrupting influence into conjugal love. Sex is no longer about procreation, and thus it becomes less and less about true, self-giving love, and more about just private enjoyment. If this analysis is accurate, we should expect to see it confirmed by experience. Are marriages in better shape now with the widespread use of contraceptives? Is society seeing any effects?
Perhaps it is here that we can see why Pope Pius XI was right to condemn contraception as an offense against the law of God and of nature. As creator, God inscribed his plan for the flourishing of men and women into the natural order of things, which we can discern by means of right reason. To deliberately frustrate the primary natural purpose of a most important human behavior, to deprive it of its transcendent reference point, to treat health as if it were a disease, is simply asking for trouble.
In his encyclical, his letter, Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI made various predictions about what the consequences of contraceptive use would be. Now, according to him, there would be more marital infidelity and a general lowering of moral standards, that more men would forget to reverence women, instead considering them mere instruments for the satisfaction of their own desires, and that governments might adopt coercive population measures. Complex truth is that some regions suffer overpopulation and many others underpopulation. And if birth control is an important issue here, so is the unjust distribution of resources. That is even a greater issue. Proper agricultural practices, education, and so forth. Of course, there are many grave reasons why it may not be good for a couple to have a child during a particular time of their life. Among these are some of the reasons given by Margaret Sanger and others in support of contraception. But let's be clear here. Birth control is not immoral, contraception is. For serious, unselfish reasons, a couple may abstain from sex completely. That's controlling birth because they can't get pregnant if they're not having sex, or only during fertile periods in order to avoid having a child. The modern scientific methods of determining exactly when a woman is fertile and when she is not are collectively referred to as natural family planning, or NFP. The NFP user affirms that there is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. The claim we're making here is not that children alone give marriage and conjugal love their exclusive value. As a communion of self-giving love, the marital union of every man and woman has great value in itself. children are not the only purpose of marriage and conjugal love, but as Pope John Paul II has written, these realities find their crowning or their proper fulfillment in the procreation and education of children. As long as infertile or elderly couples don't use contraception, then they haven't chosen to exclude and devalue the proper fulfillment of their relationship. Well, if it's not intended in order to prevent conception to treat illnesses, such use of the pill may, at times, be morally acceptable. In such cases, the contraceptive effects of the pill may be accepted as an unintended side effect.
Contraception differs from natural family planning in the way that actively lying differs from withholding the truth. If we withhold the truth, we do not directly violate the great good of truth. In the same way, avoiding the use of fertile periods is withholding the use of one's fertility, and as such is not a direct offence against life, and it can be morally acceptable or even required if done for non-selfish reasons that respect the great good of life. But contraception and lying directly both violate great goods that should be valued at all times.
Now, Lord, you know that I take this wife of mine not because of lust, but for a noble purpose.
The Catholic teaching on marriage begins with the idea that God is the author of marriage, which he created as a means to fulfill his plans for our flourishing and salvation. Inscribed by God in men and women is the natural desire to create a partnership of life with one another, a union of love. This union has the great gift of the procreation and education of children as its natural fulfillment.
In Humanae Vitae, Simon, Paul VI stated that the Church's teaching on contraception is based on the inseparable connection established by God, which man on his own initiative may not break, between the unitive significance and the procreative significance, which are both inherent in the marriage act. Together, love and life make up the noble purpose of marriage and the sexual relations of husband and wife. Love is the meaning of marriage, and life is its crowning fulfillment. I take this wife of mine not because of lust, says Tobias in the Scriptures, but for a noble purpose.
All people of goodwill should agree that procreation and intimate, selfless love are great goods that build up society. They fulfill us as men and women and bring true joy to life, while mere self-enjoyment and lust keep us turned inward and have more to do with the culture of constant entertainment than with sex and marriage.
Now, deliberately separating the natural link between life-making and love-making and treating fertility as if it were a disease, well, that's experience as experience has confirmed. That's simply asking for trouble. Yes, we ought to order our lives rationally, but we also ought to do so while keeping in touch with the natural order, valuing the good things that bring true fulfillment. A good end never justifies a bad means, ever. I'm Michael Voris, and this has been Moral Compass.
I'm Simon Rafe. We'll see you next week. God love you.